Welcome, Bob, to this interview session of IPALA. Perhaps we could start by you outlining the key leadership roles you've had of recent times.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I guess the key roles were progressively more complicated. I started as a new division head in a new Department of Developmental Pediatrics when I was first recruited to pediatrics. That went on to become the director of the Children's Rehabilitation Hospital, then vice president of medicine for the Children's and Women's Hospital.
Right.
Then head of pediatrics for a period of time. Finally, as the foundation dean for the medical school in Aga Khan University in Nairobi. Most of my career is spent at McMaster University and in UBC in Vancouver.
Yeah, very impressive. Bob, what things do you value in leadership? What do you think are the key sort of principles and issues that guide you as a pediatric leader?
So I think individuals in leadership roles are about how they support the system to advance. So, leaders should have a vision of a future, and the job is to create an environment that allows you to move towards that future. And so it's about supporting individuals, whether they're students or faculty, giving them the room, the space to grow as professionals, and obviously contribute to that vision that you have as a leader. I think as you get progressively higher, you get more challenging opportunities. And so the ability to resolve in the best way possible, oftentimes extremely challenging situations, is a leadership quality that you don't necessarily want, but it's important to have. And in the end, leadership is about moving forward and seeing that you can achieve a direction that you think for the institution is important.
So that challenge you've mentioned, Bob, about dealing with difficult situations and difficult people and sometimes irreconcilable differences, that is a real challenge in leadership, isn't it? What sort of principles do you bring for you as a leader that help guide you through situations such as those? What are the key principles that govern you in leadership?
Well, the first principle in your back pocket is your integrity and your principles of relationship and the basic principles of every good person: honesty, respect for individuals, those sorts of things. All have to come into play when you have a complex situation. But in the end, a careful analysis of the situation, how you can contribute to resolution. But in the end, sticking up for your principles. So the one in the back pocket is the ability to step down. It's a very important opportunity, but it's one you use very judiciously because it can impact the institution and obviously impact your career. But at some point in time, you may run into a situation where you simply can't operate, and the respectful thing to do is to step down. That's often not an easy situation. I've actually never had to do it, but I've come close a few times.
Yeah.
Over basic principles that I wasn't going to go to compromise. And so I think that's part of the integrity of leadership, I think.
Yes. I've worked with you, Bob, now over many years, and that quality of integrity and humility that you bring are outstanding. And my sense of looking at good leaders is that sense of integrity, humility, compassion, care, sticking to your principles. They do seem to be fairly fundamental attributes of leadership, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's an element of confidence that leaders have to have, because that confidence is reflected in the individuals who see it and engage with you. But I think good leadership is very much a moderation of ego. So confidence, but not an ego that has to be driven and fed all the time, I think makes a good leader.
I agree. Bob, thinking about younger ones who might be looking at leadership or have leadership aspirations, what advice would you give to them?
So I think my view of leaders is that they first have a vision of something that needs to move forward. And so there's probably a few of us who actually say, gee, I'm going to be a leader in the future, and this is what I need to do to get there. Yeah. So my caution is to be careful. I think you can be a leader too early. And if I looked at my career, I would say I was a leader too early. It was a default position because of timing, circumstances, and it provided opportunity. But I think people, if they have choice, they have to be careful about when in their career they want to take on significant responsibility. And the higher you go, the more compromise you make to potentially your real interests. So I think it's a balance. But I think if you don't have a drive to see change, and you simply want to be a leader because you think that's what you should do, they tend not to be as successful.
I think that's very helpful words. I feel looking at my career that I became head of an academic and a clinical section of pediatrics too early. And I wish I had a good mentor actually to help me in those earlier years. And I wish I had delayed it a bit, but just circumstances happen. It just didn't work out that way.
Yeah, well, I can tell the story that I had when I was in medical school, I went from graduate school into medical school and from graduate school into pediatrics. And I discovered actually that I'm a developmental pediatrician and I could have a career in medicine, an academic career in medicine as a developmental pediatrician. And I was mentored by a fellow by the name of Peter Rosenbaum, who I was his very first graduate student. And we developed a very close relationship and worked on leadership stuff like getting accreditation for developmental pediatrics. But my career led further and further and deeper into leadership. And his career, partly with the work he did with me as the early beginning of his career, he was a young faculty member. He's one of the top researchers in Canada now, and has had a stellar career. And I sometimes regret the fact that he didn't mentor me he may have mentored me, but I didn't listen to him to slow down. But it's the time and the circumstances and the needs that are there at the time. So you don't always have control, but I think caution is an important thing to pay attention to.
And very senior leadership roles can be quite lonely places, can't they, actually? So sometimes the more senior you get, the more isolated you become.
Yeah, I think you really have to differentiate your role as a colleague from your role as a leader, and not always do your colleagues understand that difference, so that you can discipline somebody as a leader or address a complex issue as a leader, but you're doing it as a leader, not as a colleague. In a sense. That balance is important, and it can be, depending on the circumstances of the time, that you don't always have control over.
No,
it can be a lonely environment, I guess. I've never felt lonely. I wouldn't want to scare people off taking leadership roles. But it can be challenging, and it changes the direction clearly of potentially where you had originally wanted to go.
Yeah, well, I think it's it's a reason why having a course like this can be helpful. There is so much to learn in leadership, and most of us stumbled into it and didn't get very good guidance or support. So helping people on that journey, I think, is very important. Bob, is there anything else you'd like to cover that we haven't mentioned, or you haven't had an opportunity to reflect on? Any other issues around leadership you'd like to share?
Well, I think in response to your comment, I think leadership is a teachable set of skills. There's an emotional intelligence, there's an innate development as a leader that perhaps isn't teachable, but most of the skills are teachable and learnable. And so continuous learning, whether informal programs or graduate degrees, I think the individuals, pediatricians who are going into leadership roles today, I think are better, have a better understanding of what's required than we did when we started out a number of years ago. And so I think that's really important. And so that's part of what IPALA is about, is saying, how can we help support building that learning environment, the continuous learning environment for leaders.
Yeah. No, that's really great advice, Bob. Look, thank you so much. And as I said at the beginning, I have really appreciated working alongside you in many ways in global child health. And it's great that we can continue to do so. So thank you very much for contributions. Very much appreciated.
The feeling is mutual. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Bob.